I wanted to think of the space as Margaret Garner's landscape of pain and redemption.
Because we're creating a theatrical space, we're certainly not trying to create the illusion that we're actually on the front veranda of a plantation house or that we're literally in a field. We're really creating a platform to tell the story on. But it's almost as if we've unearthed this place, or we've come to this place that it hasn't been lived in for 100 years, accepting the idea that everything comes from the performer first and that they are on a stage. Then if you can transform and make magic when everyone knows that they're in a theater and they're on a stage, it's a much more fun game to play.
The clothes really need to help us ground us not only in period, but in character.
I was an American history and government major as an undergraduate. I guess I was always wondering what I was going to do with that major, and this is great. It's all of my interests combined. I think the audience has to jump right into the story. They only have several hours to understand the people. I can help them with a visual representation to back up who the characters are. I found what they were wearing to be a little different than I might have expected. I guess I was thinking less individualized, and yet my photos are very individualized. There's a real look about each person, clothing that maybe was handed down to them, which was great. That's what I would rather have found than everyone wearing kind of the same cut shirt and pants and whatever. There are actually a lot of companies that make authentic clothing for Civil War reenactments. We see her at the wedding reception for Edward's daughter, Carolyn. She's working as a house slave. She has on a dress, possibly, again, a hand-me-down dress from the owner's family.
That story is also about white people, particularly the man who owns her. There's no slave story that exists in a vacuum.
Well, she's raped by him before the first intermission. Okay. She and her husband, Robert, decide to run away at the top of Act 2. They escape, and she still has to fight because the slave masters come to capture her and Robert, and she's still screaming, "No more. Why won't you let us be? Why won't you leave us alone?" When she's confronted by Edward Gaines and the slave catchers, she makes the decision to murder her children.
I mean, that claim that she made has no peer. These are my children, and I'll do with them what I want.
Instinctually, she knows that she has to be the real and true mother here, and that she is protecting, ultimately, her child from a fate worse than death.
You have to question whether what she's done is ethical. She might be doing something which is ultimately for the greatest good of her children.
I always thought of my job in raising my son as my first priority was always keeping him safe, and I would assume that was her feeling also.
What makes Margaret's case so important is that they wanted to charge her for destruction of property instead of murder.
Murder would have been interesting because it would have assumed her responsibility for those children. And the slave society said she has no responsibility. Having a child, not bearing it, but having it, was freedom. Because in that system, your children did not belong to you.
There were people rioting. There were hundreds of people rioting throughout her trial.
It was at the time something that was foreshadowing the impending Civil War.
And then the story was forgotten.
No one really remembered the story until Toni Morrison's Beloved brought the story back into public recognition.
It's a challenge that I accept and am willing to step up to because it's such a wonderful role that's got so many different hills and valleys of emotion to show.
You have to become these people, and it's got to be done in such a way that you're not just sort of pretending, estimating what someone would feel like. You've really got to get inside that person.
So what you have to do, if you're going to be honest, is you have to hold your baby in your hands, your arms. Not a baby, yours, mine. And come to the conclusion that if I cut his throat, that one, the one I know, it'll be better.
I am hoping that the story of Margaret Garner through this opera will be reinforced not only through the black community, but it will also teach a lesson to the white community who have not seen this side or may not know this story.
We've come a long way indeed, but we also have a very long way to go.
Having an American opera about our history and our language makes it immediate for any of those people who haven't given opera a chance because they didn't see themselves represented.
It's a fantastic moment for us to have this story brought center stage, to have an artistic representation of it. It appeals to us in a way that we can no longer ignore it.